So today's the day I get legally fed to monsters. Fun. The line shuffles forward one sad step at a time, everyone clutching their little deportation chips like the plastic might save them, while a cheerful government voice reminds us that service at the wall is the highest honor. Highest honor. The honor of being a snack. See, in Longhai City your whole worth is one number, your awakening, and mine came back at 0. Not low. 0. The scanner actually beeped twice, like even a machine felt awkward for me. 20 years old, perfectly healthy, and officially the most useless man in the city. Quick lesson on how this city works, since I won't be around much longer to explain it. Out past the walls is the Riftland's endless monster country that floods the city with beast tides whenever it feels moody. To survive, humanity grades everyone by awakening. 1 star, 2 star, on up the 9 stars to the monsters they call Grandmasters, and above even them saints, then demigods, and at the very top a handful of war gods nobody sane thinks about. Don't worry about the high end. People like me don't get a high end. If you haven't awakened by 20, the city stops pretending to care. They hand you to the reaping, a one-way ticket to the wall to soak up claws so the real hunters don't have to. Let me show you what we're all so afraid of, since it's the whole reason a city would grade its children like livestock. Twice a year, sometimes more, the Riftlands breathe out. The dead zone past the wall floods, a beast tide, the news calls it, like it's weather, and a wave of things that should not exist throws itself against the only thing standing between the monsters and 8 million people. The wall and the hunters on it. I've never been awakened, never trained, never held real power for a single day of my life. But I've stood on a rooftop and watched the horizon turn the color of a bruise, felt the air go wrong and watched distant hunters, grandmasters, the strong ones, the ones the posters love, hold a line of light against a dark that wanted to eat the world. That's what the awakening number really measures, not your worth, your usefulness to the wall. And a 0, the city had decided, was worth exactly nothing to the only war that mattered. A very convincing argument, right up until the universe hands the 0 a cheat. I used to think I'd awaken late. Lots of people do, a flicker at 16, a spark at 18. Me? Nothing. 17 years of staring at a tester that read flat 0 while the other orphanage kids oohed over their pretty little ember readings. They had a word for kids like me, unawakened. Said politely, it means hasn't bloomed yet. Said the way everyone actually says it, it means dead weight, already counting the days. I stopped flinching at it around age 12. You can only get called a corpse in waiting so many times before it just becomes your name. But here's the thing about a city run by rules. Rules always have a crack. There's exactly one legal way for an unawakened to dodge the reaping, the pact. Find a ranked hunter willing to sign for you and the state lets you live, citizenship, a roof, and a support stipend paid to them for babysitting a corpse. In return, you're theirs. Officially, you're a support partner. Unofficially, everyone calls you a leech, a grown man who survives by latching onto someone stronger, charming. The catch is small. No hunter on earth wants to chain themselves to a 0, which is why I'm in this line instead of a packed office. I've been turned down 41 times. Today's attempt 42 happens after lunch, assuming the reaping doesn't take me first. While I waited in that line, I watched the reaping actually happen because the city likes you to see it. Up ahead, a man maybe 10 years older than me reached the steel gate and his number came up red. He didn't scream. That's the part nobody tells you. They don't scream. They just go quiet, the way you go quiet when the math finally finishes and the answer is the one you were afraid of. 2 enforcers took his arms, the cheerful voice thanked him for his service to the wall, and the gate swallowed him into the dark where the beast tides live. No trial, no appeal, just a number that came up red and a city that had already moved on to the next one in line. I'd watched it happen 41 times now. Once it felt like, for every rejection of my own. I'd gotten very good at not letting my face do anything, but I counted every single one. Somebody should. People assume a 0 must be helpless. 20 years of being one taught me the opposite. When you have no power, you learn to use everyone else's. I never won a fight in my life, but I never needed to. I learned to read a room faster than anyone could throw a punch, to know which merchant shorted his scales and which enforcer could be talked in circles, to turn a small advantage into a meal and a meal into a week. The orphanage didn't make me strong. It made me observant, because observant was the only currency I was ever issued. While the kids with pretty ember readings practiced looking impressive, I practiced the only skill that ever kept me alive, figuring out exactly what a person wanted and being the one holding it. I didn't know it yet, sitting in that line, but I'd spent 20 years training for a power I didn't have, and I was about to be handed the one cheat in the universe that pays a man for doing exactly that. So with the reaping gate at my back and exactly nothing in my favor, I walked to the packed office for attempt 42, 41 rejections. Most people break around 5. The one orphanage counselor who ever bothered with me once said I had an unhealthy relationship with hope, which is the kind of thing you say to a child you've already given up on. She wasn't wrong exactly. But here's what nobody understood about my particular brand of stubbornness. It was never hope. Hope is passive. Hope sits in a line and prays its number comes up green. What I had was worse and better than hope, a flat refusal to accept that the price the world had stamped on me was the correct one. 41 hunters looked at my file and saw a corpse. I looked at the same file and saw a market inefficiency. Somewhere in this city was a deal nobody else was desperate enough to make, and I was going to find it, because being the most desperate man in the room is the only edge a zero ever gets, and I'd spent 20 years learning to make it a very sharp one. Attempt 42. Let's go get rejected with style. The packed office smells like cheap floor cleaner and other people's desperation. Behind the counter sits Mei Lin, auburn bob, red glasses, a smile she aims like a weapon, the agent who's rejected me personally about 9 times and somehow still finds it funny. Back again, Jin, she says, propping her chin on her hand. You know the success rate on your file is a rounding error from 0, right? Yes, Mei Lin. I am intimately familiar with my zeros. She slides a tablet across the counter. There's exactly 1 hunter open to a support pact this week. 1, and trust me, you do not want her. Naturally, I asked to see the file. That, in hindsight, is where my entire life changed. While Mei Lin let me stew, I read the room the way I read every room. The packed office at midday is a museum of quiet desperation. A mother 3 chairs down clutching a tester result for a kid who'd come back gray. An old man rereading a rejection he'd clearly already memorized. A teenager bouncing his knee so hard the whole bench shook. 2 days from the reaping and doing the math everyone in here does eventually. None of them looked at me. Down here, we're all very good at not looking at each other because eye contact means admitting you can see the same cliff they can. I used to think the cruelty of this place was the gate at the end of the line. It isn't. The cruelty is the waiting room, a building full of people the city has already priced at 0, sitting politely in rows, filling out the paperwork for their own disposal. I'd spent 41 visits in rooms like this. I knew every shade of that particular silence. I just never expected the day one of them would finally break in my favor. The file loaded and Mei Lin wasn't exaggerating. Yuna, 22. 2 years ago she was a rising star, a hunter prodigy the recruitment posters fought over. Then a Riflin's expedition went wrong, her whole squad died and she walked back out as the only survivor. The official story, she panicked, broke formation, got them all killed. The nickname the city gave her, the Jinx. Now she's blacklisted, broke, and 1 missed payment from her own reaping. No sponsor will touch her. No hunter will partner her, which leaves exactly 1 kind of person desperate enough to sign with the cursed woman, and exactly 1 kind she's desperate enough to accept. A leech. Hi. Mei Lin watched me read the cursed woman's file and misread my expression completely. See, told you, nobody sane signs with the Jinx. Which was true, and exactly why I was already standing up. Let me walk you through what I saw in that file, because it's a masterclass in how the whole city had the math backwards. Everyone looked at Yuna and saw a liability, a blacklisted survivor whose squad died, bad luck in human form. I looked at the same file and saw the only hunter in Longhai who, 1. was desperate enough to sign with a 0. 2. had no house, no handler and no one monitoring her, which meant no one watching what happened to her power. And 3, this was the part that made my pulse climb, was so obsessive she still trained every single day after the entire world had told her to lie down and die. A disciplined, isolated, criminally underpriced asset that throws off value daily, and nobody is watching. If I'd written a shopping list for the perfect first investment, it would just have been her name 40 times. Jin, Mei Lin said, where are you going? To make the worst decision of my life, I told her. On paper. They keep the city's untouchables in the lower district, where the lights flicker and the rent is paid in regret. Her address was a half-dead training hall she'd apparently squatted in to practice, because even disgraced, even erased, she still trained. Daily. Alone. I let myself in, and there she was, mid-form, a slim blade carving the air so cleanly the sound arrived a half-second late. Long dark red hair, eyes the cold green of deep ice, and a presence that made the room temperature feel like a personal insult. She stopped, looked at me the way you'd look at something stuck to your shoe. Reaping's that way, she said. Leeches don't get a tour. Most men would have apologized and run. I pulled up a broken stool and sat down. That alone seemed to throw her. She skipped hello entirely. If we packed, understand what you are. You sign, the stipend comes to me, all of it. You cook, you clean, you stay out of my way, and you never ever touch me. Reasonable, I said, nodding along like a good little leech. What I was actually thinking, lady, I don't want your stipend and I don't want your hand. I want you in this training hall every single day for the rest of your life, because of something you couldn't possibly know about me. But we'll get to that. Then the suspicion crept in, the look of someone burned by everyone she ever trusted. Why, she said slowly, would a 0 come to the Jinx? Sign with some retired 3-star who'd actually feed you. Why the cursed woman everyone runs from? Fair question. So I gave her the true answer minus one detail, because every hunter who'd take me would treat me like a pet. You won't pretend I'm anything at all. You need the stipend, I need to not die, and neither of us can afford pride anymore. We're not a romance. We're 2 drowning people agreeing to share one plank. Her jaw tightened. Every word landed because every word was true. She still hesitated, so I stood and delivered the line I'd rehearsed in a cracked mirror like a lunatic. You still train every day, even after they took everything. People call that delusion. I call it the only sane thing in this whole city. Sign with me, and you'll never have to choose between food and serum again, whatever it costs me. Very noble, very moving. Internally, I was doing cartwheels, because the thing I'd just sworn to bankroll, her endless, obsessive training, was about to become the single greatest investment in human history, and she was offering it to me for free. Asking me to fund her cultivation was like asking a thief to please, kindly, hold the vault keys. She studied me for a long, long moment, hunting for the trick. She didn't find it because the trick was buried somewhere she couldn't see. Finally, she exhaled, like setting down something she'd carried for 2 years. Fine, she said. One term you forgot, betray me anyway, any reason, and I'll kill you myself. I have nothing left to lose, and I'm very, very good at it. Deal. We pressed our chips together. The packed seal flared gold between our hands, bond confirmed, and somewhere deep inside me, in a place I had never felt before in 20 years of being nothing, something ancient woke up and started counting. The second the seal cooled, a window snapped open across my vision, sharp blue text only I could see. Parasite system online. I'm sorry, the what system? Then a cold, smug, faintly disappointed voice filled my skull like a customer service line that hates you. Host confirmed, unawakened. Personal growth, impossible. You will never train, never cultivate, never rise by your own effort. Wow, thanks. Great opener. However, every gain earned by anyone bonded to you is paid to you as tribute. Spend tribute to strengthen your bonded or, at ruinous cost, lease power to yourself. Grow your house. Rule it. Let me get this straight, I thought. I'm still a 0, but other people getting stronger makes me stronger. Correct, host. Oh no, I'm going to be insufferable. A status sheet unfolded and it did not pull its punches. Host, Jin. Awakening, 0%. Permanently. Personal combat power. The system actually wrote negligible, then, as if that wasn't humiliating enough, added a brick is more dangerous. Bonded, Yuna, and beside her name a small live number. Tribute, 0 for now. So here was my situation, summarized by a machine with the bedside manner of a tax audit. Alone, I am the single most worthless man in Longhai City, and that part never changes. But I am now legally, contractually attached to a woman who trains like the world owes her blood, and every drop of sweat she spends clawing her way back quietly pays out to me. I looked at Yuna, my beautiful, furious, completely unaware golden goose. Naturally, the first thing I did with a mysterious, all-powerful system was try to break it. I poked at every glowing menu like a man checking a casino for loose change. Most of it was locked behind words I didn't understand yet: bonds, plural, interesting, tribute, something ominously grayed out called sovereign functions. But one option pulsed at me, half warning, half temptation: least tribute to host, grant temporary personal power, cost, severe. Let me get this straight, I thought. I can spend my hard-earned tribute to make myself, a confirmed 0, actually strong, for a minute. Correct, host, the system said, in the tone of a lone shark who already knows how this ends. Personally, least power decays rapidly and returns nothing. It is the single most inefficient use of tribute available to you. Most hosts who rely on it die poor and briefly. Noted. So I could be strong, but only by setting money on fire. Good to know where the emergency exit was, and good to know I should never, ever use it unless the building was already burning. The other word that caught my eye was that little plural, bonds, as in more than one. Host may form additional bonds, the system confirmed when I prodded it. Each bonded contributes tribute. A larger house is a mightier host. There is no limit but loyalty. I sat with that for a second because it reframed everything. Yuna wasn't my power. Yuna was my first power. One disgraced prodigy in a dead gym already had me feeling tribute for the first time in 20 years. So what happened when it wasn't one bonded partner but a network? A web of people I'd lifted up, each of them growing, each of them paying upward into me. Other men dream of getting strong. I'd just been handed a system that rewards me for making everyone around me strong and taking a cut. It was, I realized, the most me superpower imaginable. I don't win fights. I build dynasties, and I just found the blueprint. There was one more thing in those menus I couldn't leave alone, the grayed out option the system refused to explain. Sovereign functions. Locked. Every time I prodded it, I got the same flat non-answer. Insufficient house. Access restricted. Insufficient how? Restricted by whom? A system doesn't get installed in a man's skull by accident, and a locked door implies someone who locked it and someone it's locked against. What are you? I finally asked it out loud, alone in the dark. Where did you come from? Why me? For a long moment, nothing. Then, for the only time that night, the smug customer service voice changed, went quiet, almost careful. Those functions unlock as the house grows. The rest is not yet yours to know, host. Build, then ask again. Build, then ask again. I didn't love that answer, but I recognized it because it's the same one I'd given myself every day for 20 years. You don't get to know how the story ends. You just get to make yourself too valuable to write out of it. So I shelved the questions, the way I shelve everything I can't yet afford. The mystery would keep. It always does. And somewhere, I was sure, someone who knew exactly what I was had just felt a very old machine wake up. Right on cue, Yuna rolled her shoulders, planted her feet, and slid back into her sword forms like I wasn't even there. Discipline like that, after the whole city spat on her, honestly, respect. She moved through the cuts, breathing in that slow, controlled rhythm hunters use to refine their cores, and 40 seconds in, asterisk ding. A soft chime only I could hear. Bonded Yuna trained. Tribute earned. A warm trickle ran up my spine, faint but real, the first scrap of power my body had held in 20 years of being nothing. She'd done one set. One. And I felt it. I had to physically stop myself from laughing out loud in a stranger's training hall on day one of our marriage of convenience. Now the fun part. The system let me push that tribute straight back into her. Reinvest tribute into bonded Yuna, her next breakthrough accelerates. Yes, obviously yes, take all of it. I shoved it back the instant I earned it, and across the room Yuna froze mid-form, her breathing hitched. A blocked channel she'd been grinding against for months. I watched her hit it, and this time it just opened. Energy rolled through clean. Her eyes flew wide. That's what. She spun toward me, suspicious on reflex. What did you do, me? I held up two empty hands, the picture of innocence. I'm a zero, remember? I just sat here. You're the genius. The loop had closed. She trains, I profit, I reinvest. She breaks through faster, I profit more. Compound interest with a sword. She didn't believe me, of course, smart woman. But she couldn't explain it either, and she was far too hungry for progress to argue with results. So she did the only thing that made sense to her. She trained harder, more forms, more breakthroughs, more chimes up my spine. I sat on that broken stool like a king on a very ugly throne and did the math. Every other unawakened in this city is counting down to the reaping. I just took the exact rule that doomed me and turned it into a foundation. They call my kind a leech. Fine. But a leech with a system, a plan, and a wife who refuses to quit, that's not a leech. That's a man building a dynasty starting from zero. Literally. Living with Yuna in those first days was an education in how two deeply guarded people share 200 square feet without committing murder. The deal was the deal. I cooked, I cleaned, I stayed out of her way, and I never touched her. Easy. What the contract didn't cover was the part where I'd cook a real meal, actual food, bought with my last few credits, and slide it next to her while she trained. And she'd glare at it like I'd left a trap, and then eat every bite when she thought I wasn't looking. Or the part where she'd pretend my running commentary annoyed her while very clearly listening to every word. We were two people who'd been alone so long, we'd forgotten the difference between solitude and loneliness. And I'd be lying if I said the system was the only reason I started looking forward to mornings in that dead little gym. But I told myself it was. Optimizer, remember. I had a goose to feed. The fact that the goose had a devastating dry sense of humor under all that ice was, strictly speaking, irrelevant to the ledger. I did once try to lease power to myself, for science. The system had dangled it, temporary personal strength at ruinous cost, and there is a specific kind of man who, told a button is the worst possible button, simply has to press it. I dumped a hard-won chunk of tribute into the lease option, and for about 90 glorious seconds I was strong. Actually strong. I did a pull-up. I did 3. I picked up a training dummy that had mocked me my whole life and threw it across the room like a feeling. For 90 seconds I understood what every awakened person takes for granted, what it's like to live in a body that can. And then it drained out of me like water through a fist, left me face down on the mat with nothing to show for a week of Yuna's sweat, and the system added with what I swear was satisfaction. Net value created, 0. Host reminded, you are not the weapon, you are the armory. Yuna, watching me lie there having spent a fortune to do 3 pull-ups, did not ask. I did not explain. But I filed the feeling away, the cost and the power, in case there was ever a night when the armory had to become the weapon for 10 desperate seconds. There would be, but not yet. There was one small, annoying flaw in my brilliant new empire. Empires cost money. The stipend barely covered rent, and the system was very clear. The better the fuel I fed Yuna, real serums and real food instead of the expired garbage we could afford, the faster she'd grow, and the faster I'd cash in. Right now my golden goose was running on instant noodles and spite. That had to change today, which meant I needed credits fast in a city that had written me off completely. And it just so happened the universe, petty, theatrical thing that it is, had already parked the perfect idiot across the street to take them from. His name was Kang, and he was about to have the worst week of his privileged little life. Kang, heir to the Zhao Jin serum house, the family that figured out you don't have to be born strong if you're born rich. Their serums buy awakening by the bottle, pay enough, and a mediocre talent climbs ranks a real hunter bleeds years for. Kang had been marinating in the stuff since birth, which made him a 4-star at 23 and, more importantly, the single most punchable face in Longhai City. He spotted us the way a cat spots a slow pigeon. Is that, the jinx? Loud so the whole street could enjoy it. And she's got herself a leech. The bottom of the barrel found the bottom of the barrel. Yuna's hand drifted toward her sword. I put 2 fingers on her wrist. Not yet, I thought. He's not an insult. He's an opportunity wearing designer boots. Kang sauntered over to do the thing rich boys do, narrate your poverty back to you like it's breaking news. He flicked a credit chip at Yuna's feet. For old time's sake, Jinx, buy yourself a real sponsor or a rope. His friends howled. Yuna didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at him with those cold green eyes until his grin developed a hairline crack. But I was barely listening because the system had quietly lit up the second he got close. Bystander detected. Zhao Kang. 4-star purchased. Awakening curve. Artificially inflated, structurally fragile. Translation: for those of us raising a golden goose on a budget, his power was rented, not earned. Bought muscle on a frame that never learned to carry it. And the system was practically whispering the exploit into my ear. Here's the thing about a man who bought his strength. He has never once been hit by someone who wanted it more. Kang had never bled for a single rank. Yuna had bled for all of hers and then had them stolen anyway. On paper he outranked her, but that number wasn't a measure of what she was. It was a measure of what 2 years of starvation and a revoked rank had done to a body that used to belong to a prodigy. Strip a rising star of her sponsor, her fuel, and her name for 2 years and her core withers, regresses, reads low. The meter called her a battered 3rd star now, a shadow pressed down under her own ceiling. Kang had bought every rank he wore. Yuna had bled for hers, lost them, and was 1 good meal away from starting to claw them back, and a bought 4-star has never once met a starving prodigy on her way up. So I did the math the way I always do: assets, liabilities, and the beautiful gap between what a thing costs and what it's worth, and I stepped forward past Yuna and smiled at the most punchable face in Longhai. You're right, I said warmly. We're broke, so let's fix that. 1 match. You're bought 4-star against my Jinx. You win, you own our contract. She wins. I nodded at the fat credit account practically glowing on his wrist. We retire. Kang laughed, of course he laughed. To him I just handed over a fight he couldn't lose, a full star up on paper, serum fat, an audience to perform for. The only risk was looking bored while he did it. You're betting the cursed woman against me, he wheezed. Fine. When she loses, Leech, you both belong to the Zhao house. On record, perfect. On record was exactly where I wanted it. Behind me, Yuna grabbed my arm, furious and low. Are you insane? He's a 4-star. I'm running on instant noodles and spite. Trust me, I murmured. You've broken through twice this week and you still don't know why. He bought a number. You built a sword. Then I leaned in and added the part that finally made her go still. I have never once watched you train and seen someone who loses. They cleared a ring in the street because nothing in the lower district draws a crowd like a guaranteed execution. And while Kang stretched and preened for his fans, I did the only thing I'm actually good at. I spent. Every scrap of tribute Yuna had paid me this week, every chime up my spine from every lonely set of forms in that dead training hall, I shoved all of it back into her at once. Reinvest all tribute into bonded Yuna, combat readiness. Yes, all of it. Empty me out. Across the ring Yuna rolled her neck and I watched it land like a tide coming in. Months of blocked, starved, scraped together progress unlocking at once, clean and bright. She didn't get a power-up. She got back everything the city had stolen from her, compounded. Kang raised 1 serum-bought hand and beckoned, grinning. He had absolutely no idea he had already lost. To his credit, Kang came in fast. His house had bought him a sleek glowing energy saber and just enough drilled flash to look lethal, and he opened with a flurry that would have shredded any of the gutter nobodies he was used to bullying. A screaming blue arc for her throat, a downward chop, a thrusting lunge, the saber painting hard neon streaks across the ring. Against a real hunter it was noise. Yuna read it the way you read a book you've already finished. She slipped the throat cut by a finger's width, let the chop bite empty pavement hard enough to crack it, and turned the lunge aside on the flat of her saber so the sparks sprayed across the front row. 4 exchanges. He landed nothing. And somewhere behind the grin, for the first time in his pampered life, Kang felt the specific cold of a fight he did not actually control. It lasted another 2 seconds after that. Kang overreached on one last desperate lunge, all bought speed and borrowed thunder, telegraphing a strike his body had never actually earned the right to throw. Yuna simply wasn't there. One step, the kind you only own after 10,000 lonely repetitions and a single brutal economical counter. Her saber knocked his screaming energy blade spinning across the pavement, opened a thin, clean line of red down his sword arm, and came to rest against the side of his throat before his momentum had finished its sentence. The street went dead silent. Then the system, gleeful. Bonded Yuna defeated Zhao Kang 4-star. Wager resolved. Tribute payout, substantial. A glowing transfer rune bloomed over Kang's wrist and drained. Credits, serum stipends, the whole humiliating pile straight into our account. Yuna stood over the heir of the Zhao house, breathing hard, staring at her own hands like they belonged to a stranger. I just collected the receipt. Day one of our marriage of convenience, and the leech was already in the black. I told you, I thought, grinning at my furious, magnificent golden goose. You don't lose. For a moment nobody in that street breathed. The Jinx, the cursed woman, the cautionary tale, was standing over a 4-star Zhao heir with her blade at his throat and his entire bank balance evaporating into thin air. Kang's face did something fascinating. It tried on 6 emotions and couldn't afford a single one. You, he choked, scrambling back, you cheated. There's no way. A Jinx and a leech don't. He couldn't finish because no accusation fit. We hadn't cheated. We'd just been the only 2 people in the city who knew what she was actually worth. He staggered up, spat blood and pride into the gutter, and hissed the line every loser hisses on the way out. You have no idea who my family is. Oh, I thought, pocketing his credits. I'm counting on it. Kang fled. The crowd melted away the instant there was no more blood to watch. And then it was just us, a quiet alley, and Yuna staring at me like I was a math problem that had personally insulted her. Twice, she said. In that fight twice I moved faster than I have in 2 years, and right before it started I felt something like a dam breaking. That was you. It wasn't a question. I gave her my most innocent shrug, the one I'd practiced in a cracked mirror. I'm a 0, remember. I can't do anything. She stepped closer, those cold green eyes searching mine, and for one dangerous second I thought she had me. Then she exhaled and looked away. Fine, keep your secret, leech. A pause, quieter, but you keep doing it. We walked out of that alley richer than I'd been in my entire life, which, granted, is a bar so low you could trip over it. But it was enough for the thing the system had been nagging me about since the start: fuel. Bonded growth rate scales with quality of resources consumed, it had said, in the tone of a financial advisor watching you eat instant noodles on a yacht. Until now, Yuna had been cultivating on garbage, expired ration bars, tap water, and spite. So I walked her straight into the nicest supply house in the district and bought the real thing: grade A serums, proper recovery meals, a cultivation tonic that cost more than our rent. She protested the entire way. I ignored her the entire way. You're not a charity case, I told her. You're capital expenditure. That night she trained on real fuel for the first time in 2 years, and I finally understood what I'd actually bought. The chimes didn't trickle up my spine anymore, they poured. Every form, every breath, every clean rep of a body that suddenly had something to burn. Tribute flooded in faster than I could spend it. I sat on my ugly throne of a stool and watched a genuine prodigy, properly fed at last, remember exactly how good she'd always been. At some point she stopped mid-form, breathing hard, and caught me watching. She didn't snap at me. She just held my gaze a second too long, something complicated moving behind the ice, then turned back to her sword. Not romance. Not yet. Just the first hairline crack of a person deciding, against 2 years of evidence, that maybe one person in this city wasn't lying to her. So that was day one. I'd walked into the morning the most useless man in Longhai City, 41 rejections deep and counting down to the reaping. I walked out of the night with a hunter, a system, a war chest, and a plan that compounded while I slept. The leech was in the black. But here's the part I didn't see, the part the system, for all its smug little windows, never thought to warn me about. Across the city, in a tower I couldn't afford to look at, a man was watching a replay of a four-star Zhao heir getting humiliated in a gutter by a cursed woman and a zero. And he wasn't angry, he was interested. The Zhao house doesn't get angry at problems. It buys them, breaks them, or makes them quietly disappear. And I had just put the two of us on the menu. Day 2, it turns out, was going to be a lot less funny. The knock came at 9 in the morning, which is how you know it's serious. Thugs come at night, but business comes during office hours. I opened the door to a man in a suit worth more than the building, holding a tablet and the kind of smile they teach at expensive schools. "Mr. Jin," he said like we were old friends. "I represent the Zhao family. Last night you acquired something of ours, publicly." He didn't mean the credits, he meant the humiliation. The system pinged softly behind my eyes. "Zhao agent. 7-star, do not engage." Helpful. Behind me I felt Yuna go very still, the way she did right before violence. I kept my hand on the doorframe and my voice bored. "We won the wager on record. Take it up with the registry." His smile didn't move a millimeter. "I'm not here about the wager. I'm here about your future." He laid it out with the patience of a man who has never once been told no and meant it. The Zhao house was prepared to be generous. They'd clear our debts, dissolve the contract, and relocate Yuna to a proper sponsor, one of theirs. As for me, the leech, I'd be handed a small sum and strongly encouraged to disappear before the reaping remembered my name. It was, he stressed, a kindness. What he was actually saying under all that cologne was simpler. "You embarrassed us, so we're going to quietly take the one valuable thing you own and erase the rest of you." And the worst part, 6 months ago it would have worked. A zero doesn't say no to a 7-star. But 6 months ago I didn't have a golden goose who had just remembered how to fly. So I smiled and did the thing no one in that family had ever had done to them. I made them an offer back. "Counter-proposal," I said. "Yuna stays, the contract stays, and in 1 month at the district open trials, public on record, cameras and everything, she fights whoever you want from your stable, your pick. If she loses, you get her the contract and me on a silver platter, no fuss. If she wins." I let it hang. "The Zhao house publicly sponsors the jinx and eats the headline." His smile finally flickered because he understood the trap. They couldn't refuse without admitting they were frightened of a cursed woman and a zero. Pride is a wonderful thing to sell to people who have far too much of it. 1 month, he said tightly, and left. Yuna shut the door and rounded on me. "You just bet my life, again." "I bet your life," I agreed, "on the only sure thing I have ever found." She was furious, and she had every right to be. The last people who made plans with her life in the room got her branded and blacklisted. I get it. So I didn't argue. I told her the truth I'd been sitting on instead. "Every day you train, I get stronger. I don't know why yet, and I'm not ready to explain how, but it's real, and it means your ceiling isn't a number on a file anymore. It's however hard you're willing to work, times whatever I can pour back into you. The whole city wrote you off at a fixed price. I'm the one idiot betting you're an appreciating asset." For a long moment she just stared at me, and something in her face that had been clenched tight for 2 years loosened by maybe a single degree. "You're insane," she said. But she said it softer this time. That night she trained like the month was already half gone. And me? I had 30 days to turn a starved, blacklisted prodigy into someone who could beat whatever monster a noble house would buy to make an example of her. 30 days, 1 golden goose, and a system that paid me to invest in her. The math was tight, but it was the best math I had ever been handed. I pulled up the status sheet and looked at the new line glowing at the bottom, the one that had appeared the second I shook that agent's hand. New objective, district open trials. 30 days, failure, contract forfeit, host termination. Termination, cute. The system had a sense of humor after all. I cracked my knuckles, looked at Yuna carving the air in the lamplight, and grinned. 30 days to make this whole city regret writing us off. Let's get to work. While we trained, the Zhao house did what wounded power always does. It convened. I wasn't there, obviously, but you don't need to be in the room to know how that conversation went. A family like the Zhao don't lose to a leech and a jinx and simply absorb it. A public humiliation is a wound to the brand, and a brand is the only thing a noble house actually sells. Somewhere in a tower I'd never be allowed to enter, Kang stood in front of his father and made the case to crush us properly, not out of strategy, but because a boy who's never been told no needs someone smaller to blame. And his father, who hadn't built a serum empire by being sentimental, agreed for a colder reason. If word got out that the Zhao name could be beaten by nobodies, every nobody in the city would start getting ideas. So they didn't plan to win the trial. They planned to make an example, buy the deadliest blade money could rent, and let the whole city watch what happens to people who embarrass their betters. I didn't know the details yet, but I knew the shape of it. Powerful people are predictable. That's the only reason people like me ever win. Day 1 of 30. I learned fast that funding a prodigy is like feeding a furnace that thanks you by trying to eat more. The premium serums I'd bought with Kang's money, the ones meant to last a month, Yuna burned through in 9 days because the better she got, the more her body could actually absorb, the faster she climbed, the more it cost. Compound interest cuts both ways. By day 10, our war chest was a sad little number and the trial was still 3 weeks out. I sat on my stool doing the grim arithmetic while Yuna, blissfully unaware, broke another plateau and sent another warm flood of tribute up my spine. Great. Wonderful. My golden goose was laying golden eggs and eating platinum to do it. I needed money, a lot of it fast, and I'd already robbed the one rich idiot dumb enough to bet against us. Which is how I ended up back at the packed office, leaning on Mei Lin's counter like a man with a plan instead of a man with 11 credits. She looked up, red glasses catching the light, and grinned like Christmas had come early. The leech returns, and look at you, you've got that face. The I'm about to make my problem someone else's face. I missed you too, Mei Lin. I need information, and you're the most dangerously well-connected person I've ever underpaid. Her grin widened. Flattery. Bold from a man who can't afford lunch. But she didn't say no. Mei Lin, I'd learned, collected secrets the way other people collect grudges, and she'd been watching me beat a Zhao heir with a cursed woman and a smile. She was curious now, and curiosity, in my experience, is just generosity that hasn't been asked the right way yet. Getting into the underground circuit wasn't as simple as showing up. The pit had rules, not many, but the few it had, it enforced with the kind of finality that doesn't involve courts. You needed a sponsor inside, a fighting name that couldn't be traced, and a very good reason for the house bookmakers to believe you weren't a plant. Mei Lin handled all three before lunch, because Mei Lin's actual superpower isn't connections. It's that she spent years quietly collecting favors from people who'd be ruined if anyone knew they owed her. She got Yuna a clean fighting alias, the Ghost, which I thought was a touch dramatic until I saw how well it sold, forged just enough paper to make her untraceable, and whispered to exactly the right bookmaker that a desperate broke woman with more pride than sense had wandered in looking to lose money fast. "You owe me," she said, sliding the credentials across the counter. "And not in money. I'm building a tab, Leech, and someday I'm going to call it in all at once, and you're going to hate how much I've added up." "Looking forward to it," I said. And I meant it. A person who deals in favors instead of cash is the most valuable node a man like me can have. I just had the sense even then that Mei Lin was playing a longer game than I could see. I was right. But that's a problem for a later part of the story. She slid me a name for free, which told me she wanted something bigger later. "There's an underground rank circuit," she said low. "Unsanctioned duels, real money, no questions about your awakening, they only care if you can win. Nobles run book on it from private boxes." She tapped the counter. "A blacklisted jinx can't enter the legal trials for cash. But down there, nobody checks her file. They just see a pretty woman they assume is easy money." I felt the plan assemble itself, clean and ugly and perfect. "Let me make sure I understand," I said. There's a place where rich people will personally hand my undervalued asset large sums of money because they're too arrogant to read a resume. And it's legal adjacent enough that the Zhao house can't cry foul. Mostly. Maylin, I think I love you. Everyone does. It's a problem. The pit solved the income problem. It did not solve the burn rate. Premium serum at boutique prices was eating our winnings as fast as Yuna could win them, and the system kept cheerfully reminding me that better fuel meant faster growth, meant a better shot at the trial. I needed a supplier who wasn't robbing me. Which is how I ended up in the worst corner of the lower market, in front of a cramped shop that smelled like a chemistry accident, haggling with a grizzled old man the city had quietly thrown away. Tan. Once, apparently, a master alchemist for an upper house, until he refused to cut a batch with cheap filler that would have hurt people, and got blacklisted for the crime of having ethics. Now he brewed real serum for nobody, in a shop nobody visited, slowly going broke, being the most skilled man in the district. The whole city was full of people like this. I was starting to notice. Discarded, undervalued, mispriced. And I was the one man in Longhai who'd been handed a system that pays him to fix exactly that. I didn't haggle him down. That's the move everyone made on Tan, and it was exactly why he was starving. Instead, I did the math out loud the way I do. Your serum is better than the boutique stuff, and you sell it for a third of the price because nobody knows you exist. So I don't want a discount. I want exclusivity. I fund your shop, you brew for me first, and when my partner becomes the most talked about hunter in the city, you become the alchemist who fuels her on the record where the upper houses who blacklisted you have to watch. The old man stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Boy, he said slowly, what in the world are you? Just a leech with a plan, I told him. He laughed, first time in a while, by the sound of it, and shook my hand. One more node on the web. The system gave a soft, approving chime I was beginning to really enjoy. Yuna had a sword. Now she had a forge. And I had a second person quietly making my house stronger. With Tan's forge feeding her real fuel at a third of the price, the loop finally hit the gear I'd been dreaming about. Watch how this compounds, because compounding is the whole magic trick. Yuna fights, I earn tribute. I spend tribute, she breaks through. She breaks through, she wins bigger fights. Bigger fights, more credits. More credits, better fuel from Tan, faster than the boutiques could ever supply. Faster fuel, faster growth, bigger tribute. Every single loop fed the next one. And somewhere in there, the curve stopped being a line and became a wall going straight up. In 9 days, she clawed back ground 2 years of starvation had stripped out of her, channel after starved channel reopening. I sat on my stool with a status sheet that kept rewriting itself faster than I could read it, watching numbers I used to dream about scroll by like they were nothing, and I started laughing. Actually laughing, alone in a dead gym, because the city had looked at a zero and a jinx and a broke old alchemist and seen 3 pieces of garbage. They had no idea they were looking at a machine, and I just figured out how to floor the accelerator. Selling the idea to Yuna went about as well as you'd expect. You want me to fight in an illegal pit, she said flatly, for the entertainment of the same kind of people who ruined me. Yes, I said, but this time they pay you for the privilege and they don't know who you are. She didn't like it. Pride and a lifetime of being used will do that. So I told her the only thing that ever actually worked on her, the truth, framed as numbers. Every credit we win down there buys a week of fuel. Every week of fuel is another realm closer to wiping the floor with whatever the Zhao house throws at you in 3 weeks. You don't have to like the room. You just have to be the most dangerous thing in it, which, conveniently, you already are. She was quiet a long moment. Then, what's my cut? There she is. With real fuel in her for the first time in 2 years, Yuna's body remembered what it used to be. The first night the meter ticked over to 4th star and I felt the tribute chime up my spine like a register opening. The second night 5th. The third, 6th, channels that had been starved shut for 2 years, unblocking one after another. Each climb a clean, bright note in my head, each one money in the bank. She wasn't learning. She was remembering. And on the third night she hit the wall she'd been stuck under since before her fall. The seventh star, the exact height the recruitment posters had once fought over. Not a new peak, her old one. She'd been pressing against it for 2 years on an empty stomach and a broken name, and it had never, ever moved. I fed the reserve back into her at the exact instant she pushed, and the wall didn't crack. It dissolved. Yuna came out of the form gasping, eyes wide, hands shaking, staring at a version of herself she'd been told for 2 years she would never see again. She started and couldn't finish. I know, I said softly. Welcome back. She didn't cry, but it was a near thing, and I had the decency to study the ceiling while it wasn't happening. Somewhere in those weeks, without either of us deciding to, we became a team. She'd finish a brutal set and drop onto the mat beside my stool, breathing hard, and I'd hand her water and a number, how much closer to the next breakthrough she was, where her form had a gap, which channel was about to open. She stopped asking how I knew. She just started using it. And one evening, half as a joke, she tried to teach me to throw a punch. It went exactly as well as you'd expect. I have the natural combat instincts of a folding chair, and for the first time since I'd met her, Yuna laughed. Not a smirk. A real laugh, surprised out of her, quickly stifled like she'd done something illegal. You are genuinely hopeless, she said. Mortally, I agreed. How are you not dead? I find someone competent and make myself useful, I said. She went quiet at that, the laugh fading into something more careful, and said, almost to herself, yeah, I'm starting to see that. It wasn't a romance. We'd both have denied it under oath. But the dead little Jim had stopped feeling like a business arrangement, and we both knew it, and neither of us was brave enough to say so. The underground arena was everything Mei Lin promised. A converted freight hangar that smelled of ozone and money, ringed with private boxes where the city's quietly powerful came to watch poor people hit each other. Nobody looked twice at Yuna, a slim woman in a patched coat, no rank insignia, dead broke. They practically licked their lips. The bookmaker gave her the worst odds on the card. The crowd put their money on the muscle-bound 4-star she was matched against. And up in the boxes, bored nobles barely glanced over, already counting their winnings. I took every credit we had left and put it on Yuna. The bookmaker actually laughed at me. Write it down, I told him pleasantly. I want to remember your face. Then I leaned on the rail, looked at my furious, magnificent, wildly underpriced golden goose, and waited for the city to learn the same lesson Kang did. Tuition was about to get expensive. People assumed I just stood at the rail and watched, which suited me fine. Underestimation is a renewable resource. But I wasn't watching the fights, I was reading them. The system tagged every bonded gain, sure, but it also, I discovered, quietly appraised anyone who got close. Rank, the shape of their power, the cracks in it. Opponent, heavy striker. Power, brute, untrained. Weakness, commits early, recovers slow. I couldn't fight a child. But I could see a fighter's entire structure laid out like a balance sheet, and I could tell Yuna exactly where the red ink was between rounds. She'd come back to the corner breathing hard, and I'd murmur 3 words, drops his guard, or favors the left, or counts to 2, and watch her file it and spend it on the very next exchange. We were a terrible hunter and a worse fighter, individually. Together, we were a woman who could read your soul and a man who could read your spreadsheet. The boxes thought they were betting against a lucky brawler. They were betting against the most thorough due diligence in the lower city. No wonder we never lost. She didn't win all of them clean. I want to be honest about that because the highlight reel lies. There was a fight in the second week. A wiry, vicious woman who'd clearly clawed her way up the same gutter Yuna had, that went the distance and then some. No tribute trick was going to make Yuna magically better than someone who wanted it as badly as she did. They beat the hell out of each other for 3 full rounds, and Yuna took the win by a margin so thin the bookmaker had to check the replay twice. She came back to the corner with a split lip and a look I hadn't seen before, not the cold focus, not the haunted thing, something almost like respect. She was good, Yuna said, spitting blood, better than half the ranked hunters I trained with, and she's down here fighting for scraps because nobody ever bet on her. She looked at me then, and I knew exactly what she was thinking because I was thinking it too. The city was full of them, discarded prodigies, mispriced talent. A whole underclass the system had written off, any one of whom might be a fortune to the right investor. I filed it away. The network was going to get a lot bigger than one sword and one forge. I just didn't know yet how many of the city's throwaways were about to become my house. I dumped every scrap of stored tribute into her the instant the bell rang, and Yuna stopped pretending to be prey. What the boxes saw next didn't make sense to them. A blacklisted nobody moving like a top-tier hunter, reading a 4-star's attacks before he finished thinking them, ending it with a single brutal, beautiful exchange that put him on the floor staring at the ceiling. Silence. Then the bookmaker's face did the exact thing I'd asked him to remember it for. Our 11 credits became a small fortune, and up in the private boxes the bored nobles weren't bored anymore. They were leaning forward, whispering, suddenly very interested in the cursed woman nobody had bothered to look up. Which was the one flaw in my perfect little money machine, though I wouldn't understand it for another week. I'd come there to stay invisible. Instead, I just held an audition, and someone in those boxes was hiring. The first offer came before we'd even left the arena floor. A man in good but not great clothes, mid-tier money, the kind that's clawing to be upper-tier, fell into step beside us with a smile and a number, a generous number. That was extraordinary, he told Yuna, not me, pointedly not me. Whatever the leech is paying you, I'll triple it. A real sponsor, a real house. You're wasted on. He flicked a glance at me like I was something on his shoe. It was a good offer. Objectively, coldly, on paper, it was a better deal than anything I could give her, and I knew it, and I made myself say nothing because the one thing you never do with a free creature is put your hand on the cage. Yuna stopped walking, looked the man up and down with those cold green eyes, and said, in a tone that could have frosted glass, "He bet on me when I was nothing. You're betting on me now that I'm something. Do you really not understand why that's not the same?" Then she walked on, left him standing there and didn't look at me, but I caught the smallest, smuggest curve at the corner of her mouth. Best return on investment I never had to pay for. For a little while before the Zhao ultimatum turned everything into a countdown, we just won. And I want to give us that because it didn't last. With real money for the first time in either of our lives, I did the math on quality of life and found, to my surprise, that it was worth investing in. We didn't leave the dead little gym. Yuna refused, and honestly so did I. It had become ours, but I fixed it up. Real equipment, heat that worked, a door that locked. I bought Yuna a proper coat to replace the patched one, and she stared at it for a full minute like she'd forgotten people were allowed to own nice things, then quietly kept wearing the old one anyway because the torn rank patch was a wound she wasn't ready to stop pressing on. I let her. Some things you don't optimize. We ate real food. She slept, actually slept, for the first time in 2 years. And one night I caught her mid-meal just looking around our patched-up little kingdom with an expression I'd never seen on her. Not happy exactly, she didn't have the muscle for that yet, but something adjacent. Safe. I added it to the ledger. Best return I ever got, and it never paid a single credit. For 2 weeks, the pit was the best business in Longhai City. Yuna fought twice a week under a fake name, and twice a week the boxes bet against her, and twice a week I collected their money with a smile that I'll admit became genuinely insufferable. The system loved it. Every fight was a fortune in tribute. Every payout bought a week of premium fuel. Every week of fuel turned my golden goose into something the word prodigy was starting to feel too small for. She'd walked in a starving, blacklisted nobody. She'd reclaimed her old 7-star self in 3 nights, and then, somewhere in that second week, she did the thing that made my hands actually shake on the rail. She crossed the 8th star, past her old peak, past the height she'd fallen from, into territory the prodigy she used to be had never once touched. The system chimed it, and I had to sit down. She wasn't reclaiming anymore. She was building something new, and she moved through everything the boxes threw at her like furniture, bought brawlers and inflated heirs who'd have flattened her a month ago. The whispers started, the cursed woman, the patchcoat ghost, who is she? And I let them. Mystery is good for odds. The only rule I gave Yuna was simple. Win clean, win fast, and never, ever let them see your face long enough to look you up. Every circuit has a king, and the pits was a slab of a man called Bao, the Ironhide, to the boxes that bet on him. Undefeated in 40-some fights, built like a collapsed building, and possessed of the specific arrogance of a man who'd never once met a problem he couldn't simply hit. He'd been the crowd's favorite money printer right up until a patchcoat ghost started stealing his headlines. So one night he planted himself in front of Yuna between matches, looked her up and down like a butcher pricing meat, and laughed. "This is the ghost everyone's scared of, a skinny stray in a thrift store coat," he leaned in. "Tell your little manager to put you in the ring with me, sweetheart. I'll make it quick. I'm a gentleman." Yuna didn't even look up from wrapping her hands. "I don't fight furniture," she said. The crowd that heard it howled. Bao stopped laughing. And I, watching from the rail, started grinning. Because nothing on earth is more profitable than a proud man who's just been embarrassed in public. I didn't let her fight him. Not yet. That's the thing about a rival. A good schemer doesn't spend one the first time he's angry. He lets the pressure build, lets the odds fatten, lets the whole circuit start asking the question he wants asked. Who'd win, the Ironhide or the Ghost? For 2 weeks I fed that question. I had Yuna win flashier, faster, against bigger names, while I quietly refused every challenge Bao threw, letting the boxes read it as fear. The odds on a Bao versus Ghost match climbed like a fever. The side bets got obscene, and Bao, furious and certain and exactly as easy to read as Kang had been, kept taking the bait, kept telling anyone who'd listen what he'd do to her. "Good, keep talking, big man. Every insult you spend in public is another zero on the check I'm going to cash with your face." I wasn't avoiding the fight. I was pricing it, and when I finally let it happen, it was going to fund us straight through to the trial. When I finally let the Ironhide match happen, the whole pit turned out for it. Bao had spent 2 weeks telling the boxes he'd end the Ghost in 1 round, and the boxes, bless their greedy hearts, believed him, which meant the odds against Yuna were the fattest I'd ever seen. I put everything we had on her. Everything. The bookmaker didn't laugh this time. He'd learned. Bao came out of his corner like a landslide with a grudge, and for exactly 4 seconds it looked like the crowd might get the slaughter they'd paid for. Then Yuna stopped letting him hit her. What the Ironhide had never had to learn, in 40 fights of just being bigger, was what to do against someone who refused to be where his fists were. He threw bombs, huge bare-knuckled haymakers, each one trailing a crack of displaced air, any one of them a fight tender if it landed. None of them landed. Yuna ducked under the first and buried 2 precise, brutal body shots into his ribs that folded even that mountain of muscle a half-inch. She slipped the second so close it parted her hair. The bigger they are, she'd learned, the more committed every swing has to be, and a committed swing is just an invitation with extra steps. The crowd's bloodlust curdled into confusion, then into something like awe. Bao, breathing hard now, blood sheeting from a split brow he didn't remember earning, did the only thing his pride allowed. He loaded up one final, world-ending overhand to erase her. He overreached. And Yuna stepped inside it, caught the committed weight of him on a perfect throw, and put the Ironhide through the floor of his own arena in front of every single person who'd bet against her. The impact shook dust from the lights. The payout broke the bookmaker's week. It also broke something else I should have been watching more carefully. Here's the thing about humiliating a proud man in public to make money. You also make an enemy, and enemies talk. Bao didn't take the loss like Kang did, no threats, no tantrum. He just lay there staring at the ceiling, and then he laughed, low and ugly, and said the thing that turned my stomach to ice. "You're not a hunter," he wheezed at Yuna. "I've fought hunters. You fight like a dead squad's worth of someone else's tricks, like a ghost wearing a lot of borrowed faces." He spat blood and grinned up at me because he'd felt it, felt the borrowed surge, the thing that made no sense. "Whatever you're doing, leech, somebody upstairs is gonna want to know how." I told myself he was just a sore loser running his mouth, but the boxes had gone very quiet, and up in the dark above the lights I felt, for the first time, the specific cold weight of being watched by something that didn't bet, something that collected. After Bao's little speech about borrowed faces, I started watching the watchers. And once I looked, I couldn't unsee it. The same figure in the same high box. 3 fights running, never betting, never cheering, just cataloging. Money men fidget. Predators are still. This one was very, very still. I didn't know who she was yet. I wouldn't get the silver card for another week, but I knew the posture, because it's the same one I wear at the rail. The look of someone appraising an undervalued asset and deciding when to buy. It is a deeply unsettling thing, to be the smartest schemer in every room you've ever walked into and suddenly catch someone running the exact same play on you. So I did the only sensible thing. I started winning quieter, pulled Yuna's flashiest finishes, kept our faces down, banked the money fast, and told myself we'd be gone before whoever it was made their move. I was wrong, of course. You don't get to opt out of being interesting once you've made yourself valuable. But for about a week, I let myself believe we could win the trial, take the money, and disappear back into the comfortable nothing the city had assigned us. Cute, in hindsight. Bao found us a week after I broke him in front of his entire world. I tensed for a fight. A proud man, humiliated, is a predictable kind of dangerous, but he didn't come swinging. He came with a bottle and a question. "How'd you know," he said, sitting down uninvited at our table like we were old friends, "that I'd overcommit on the third exchange?" I didn't, I lied smoothly. "Yuna's just good," he snorted. "Bull, you read me like a ledger leech. I've been fighting 20 years and nobody's ever taken me apart that clean." He took a long drink, then said the thing that told me Bao the Ironhide was a lot smarter than his neck suggested. "Here's my problem. I'm too old and too broke to keep getting younger men's faces shoved in the dirt, but a man who can see how a fight ends before it starts, that man could use a piece of muscle that does what it's told and asks no questions." He stuck out a scarred hand. "I'm done being king of a gutter. Put me in your gutter instead." I looked at the hand, looked at Yuna, who gave the tiniest shrug, and I thought, the network just grew a wall of muscle for the price of one humiliation and a bottle. Some of the best deals find you. The past, though, always finds a way to buy a ticket. On the night of her 8th fight, a man in the 3rd box went pale when Yuna pulled her hood back to breathe between rounds. I caught it because I catch everything now. The flinch, the lean to a companion, the whispered word I could read off his lips even at distance. Jinx. By morning, the rumor had legs. The cursed survivor of the Wei expedition, fighting in the pits. And Yuna, who had spent 2 years being a ghost on purpose, went quiet in a way I hadn't seen before, not cold, not angry, afraid. I didn't push. But that night, sharpening a blade that didn't need it, she said it to the wall, not to me. There were 9 of us. Commander Wei gave the order. 9 went in, I came out. A long pause. And somehow I'm the one they call cursed. I'm a schemer, not a saint, so let me be honest about what happened next. My first instinct was to file that information away as an asset, a motive, leverage. Every instinct I'd survived on said use it. Instead, for once in my self-interested life, I just listened. She told me about Commander Wei, how his greed marched them into a Riflin's hot zone the maps marked red, how the beast tide came and he called the retreat that saved himself and left the rest, how a man named Ren took the one trophy they salvaged and the credit that came with it, and how the official report needed someone to blame who wasn't a war hero with connections. So they blamed the survivor, the jinx whose bad luck doomed them all. It's a very clean story if you don't think about it. I thought about it, and somewhere under the optimizer's ledger, in a place I don't visit often, I quietly added a second objective the system never gave me. A week after the rumor spread, the past sent someone in person. He was waiting outside the training hall one evening, a hunter, mid-rank, in the clean-pressed coat of someone with a house behind him, and the second Yuna saw his face she went so still I thought the air had frozen. "Captain Mun," she said, flat. He'd been on the expedition. One of the 4 who lived because Commander Wei called the retreat that left the rest. One of the 4 who signed the report that buried her. He couldn't meet her eyes, which told me he knew, had always known, exactly what the truth was. "I heard you were fighting again," he said to the ground. "I came to tell you to stop, drawing attention. People who signed that report, they'd rather you stayed a ghost. Wei's a commander now. Ren's got a seat on the association board. You coming back from the dead is bad for very powerful men." Yuna didn't raise her voice. She just asked the only question that mattered. "And what would you rather, Captain?" He flinched like she'd hit him, opened his mouth, closed it, and left without answering. Because the honest answer, that he'd rather keep his comfortable life than carry the truth he'd helped bury, was one even he couldn't say out loud. After Captain Munn slunk off, Yuna stood very still in the dark for a long time. I didn't fill the silence. I've learned that her silences are load-bearing. Finally, she said, not quite to me. "I used to dream about clearing my name, standing in front of the association, the truth on a screen, everyone who called me cursed having to watch. I held on to that for 2 years. She let out a slow breath. Now Wei's a commander and Ren's on the board, and the only man who knows the truth would rather pretend he doesn't. There's no screen, there's no day. There's just powerful men who decided my life was a price worth paying and a city that agreed. She finally looked at me. So I stopped dreaming about justice. It was making me weak. I understood that, I did. But standing there, watching the strongest person I'd ever met talk herself out of deserving justice because the world had taught her it wasn't for sale to people like us, something cold and patient settled into me. I didn't say it out loud. She wasn't ready, and frankly neither was I, but the system tracks objectives, and that night I added one it would never have given me on its own. Wei, Ren. Not today, not this part of the story. But I'm a man who collects undervalued things and waits for the price to come due. And a debt that big, left alone, only ever compounds. Of course, the universe heard me get sincere and immediately decided to punish it. By then Yuna had climbed all the way to the 9th star, the very top of the star ranks, the last rung before the first true realm, standing higher than the prodigy she used to be had ever stood. So when the next Pit Knight's card came different, the answer someone with deep pockets had bought to put the cursed woman back in the ground had to be something that could actually meet her up there. A 9-star enforcer, a real one, brought in specifically for the job. The odds finally swung against the house favorite, me. I should have pulled her. He wasn't a bought, inflated number like the men she'd been carving through. He was the genuine article, a hardened killer who'd earned every rank the hard way, and the first opponent the pit had ever put in front of her who was actually her equal. Not ranks above. Just real, which, after a month of flattening bought airs, was its own kind of terrifying. The smart play, the optimizer's play, was to take our winnings and vanish rather than bet her on a fight that could honestly go either way. But I looked at Yuna's face, at the way she'd been carrying 9 ghosts for 2 years, and I watched her decide, not for money, not for me, but for herself, that she was done losing to people who bought what she'd bled for. "Fund me," she said quietly. "All of it." So I did. God help me, I emptied the whole account into her and prayed the math would hold. The bell went, and for the first time in a month, Yuna had to actually fight. The enforcer came in heavy, a brutal 2-handed greatsword he swung like it weighed nothing. Every blow meant to shatter a guard and the arm behind it. She met the first on the angle and felt it ring down to her teeth. The second she didn't meet at all, just slid off the line a hair too slow, and the edge laid a shallow red line across her shoulder. He was fast and patient, and he'd done this for a living. He read the small tells of a younger fighter the way I read a balance sheet. They traded the length of the ring, sparks screaming where the heavy blade kissed her saber, a fine spray of red from a grazed cheek, the crowd on its feet howling for the kill they'd paid to see. I kept the river flooding up my spine and out into her, and for a while it was enough. For a while. It was the first fight she didn't win clean. He was faster than anyone she'd faced, and worse, he was experienced, he'd killed before, and it showed. I poured tribute into her until the warm river up my spine ran thin, then thinner, and then I felt something I never had, the bottom of the well. Tribute reserves depleted, the system said, for once not smug. Host cannot sustain output. Across the ring Yuna staggered, a line of red opening along her ribs, and I finally understood the lesson the system had been too polite to spell out. I'm not a battery that never dies. I'm a bank, and banks can run dry. For one cold second I had nothing left to give her, and she was alone in that ring with a killer, exactly as alone as the city had always told her she was. And then Yuna did the thing that rewrote everything I thought our arrangement was. She stopped waiting for my help. Here's what alone looks like when you've had 2 years to practice it. The enforcer felt my flood cut out. Killers at that level always do. The way a swimmer feels the current die. And he smiled impressed, because a wounded fighter whose tricks have run dry is just meat that hasn't lain down yet. He drove her back with a flurry of crushing overhead swings, and one she didn't slip. The flat of the greatsword caught her across the side and put her down on one knee, blood running freely down her ribs now, the whole arena leaning in to scent the end. And Yuna, bleeding and empty, with nothing more coming from me, did the only thing she'd ever truly been able to count on. She stopped trying to outmuscle him and started taking him apart in her head. The half-beat he needed to reset that heavy blade. The over-rotation at the end of every big swing. The way his weight committed forward the instant he smelled a finish. She'd been collecting it the whole fight without knowing she'd need it. Now it was the only weapon she had left. Here's the part I'd been too busy counting tribute to understand. Everything I'd given her over 30 days, every reinvested breakthrough, every clean rep, every credit of fuel, none of it vanished when the well ran dry. It had become hers. Permanently. I wasn't renting her power. I was building it, and built things stay built. So when I had nothing left to give, Yuna stopped fighting like someone being carried and started fighting like someone who had earned every inch of what she was. She took a hit to land a better one. She baited him into one more of those big over-rotated swings, slipped inside the half-beat he needed to haul the heavy blade back. The exact seam she'd spent the whole fight cataloging, and ended it there. One brutal economical cut turning his own committed weight against him, wounded and gasping and on her own 2 feet, with the 9-star face down in the dirt and the whole arena dead silent. I didn't reinvest a single point. I couldn't. She won that one alone, and when she found my eyes across the ring, bleeding and furious and alive, she wasn't looking at a sponsor anymore. She was looking at the first person who ever bet everything on her and meant it. Tan serum did in a night what the city's expired garbage couldn't have done in a week. By morning, the gash along Yuna's ribs was a pale line instead of a danger. I'd sat up the whole night anyway, which I told myself was strategic. It wasn't. Somewhere around the 3rd hour she woke, found me still there, and didn't comment on it, which was its own kind of comment. His name was Giant, she said, out of nowhere, staring at the ceiling. On the expedition. He was 17. I told him to stay behind me. A long silence. I've replayed it 10,000 times. There's no version where staying behind me saved him. Wei sent us into a red zone for a relic he wanted. The tide came, and 17-year-olds don't outrun a beast tide. But the report needed it to be my fault, so it was. And the worst part, her voice didn't break, which was somehow worse than if it had, is that for 2 years alone, with everyone calling me cursed, I started to believe them. I didn't tell her it wasn't her fault. She'd heard that from people who didn't mean it. I just stayed. When she finally slept, I sat in the dark and did the kind of math I don't like. I'd nearly gotten her killed. Not Wei, not the Zhao house, not a 9-star me. My beautiful compounding engine had a flaw I'd been too pleased with myself to respect. It ran dry, and it ran dry at exactly the worst moment, because the worst moments are the ones that demand the most. I'd been playing this like a man who couldn't lose. I could. She could. And the difference between a clever plan and a dead partner was a single empty reservoir at a single bad second. So I changed. No more spending the instant I earned. From now on, I'd hoard a war chest deep enough that the well could never run dry when it mattered, even if it meant Yuna climbing slower in the meantime. Worse growth rate. Better survival rate. And somewhere in that night, without quite noticing, I'd stopped optimizing for the most power and started optimizing for her getting to keep breathing. That should have told me something about where this was going. After that night, I changed the strategy. The whole month I'd been spending tribute the instant I earned it, reinvest, breakthrough, repeat, a beautiful little engine that, it turned out, left me bankrupt at the exact moment it mattered most. Never again. So for the final stretch, I did the most unnatural thing a compulsive optimizer can do. I sat on my money. Every chime up my spine, every flood from every fight and form, I let it pool. Untouched. A war chest. Yuna kept climbing anyway, slower now, on premium fuel and pure stubbornness instead of my reinvested floods, pressing right up against the edge of the Grandmaster realm, higher than she'd ever stood even as the prodigy they'd all once bet on, and I just saved. Because the Zhao house was not going to send fair, and when they sent whatever they sent, I wanted a reservoir deep enough to drown it. Day 28. 2 days left. And for the first time in my life, I had something in reserve. Mei Lin delivered the bad news for free, which is how I knew it was very bad. They're not fielding one of their house hunters, she said, sliding me a file. The Zhao family bought a ringer for your trial, outside talent, a duelist. I opened it and felt my stomach do something unprofessional. Peak Grandmaster, the top of the entire realm, the deadliest blade the dueling circuit had ever produced. A circuit killer who went by the glass blade, famous for ending matches in a single exchange and specifically for never once having lost. A perfect, untouched record. And the part that put real ice in my stomach wasn't his rank, it was the whisper underneath it. That he was a man pressing on the ceiling of his whole realm, the kind of monster who could break through into Saint any day now, maybe in the right fight, against the right pressure. The Zhao house wasn't trying to win the trial. They were trying to make Yuna a corpse on a public stage legally with a clean record and a smile. Jin, Mei Lin said, and for once she wasn't grinning. A peak Grandmaster is a different animal. This isn't a 4-star with a haircut, this is a man one breath from Saint. People die against the glass blade and the cameras call it sport. I know, I said. I was already doing the math. The terrifying, beautiful math. Mei Lin didn't give me the glass blade's file out of kindness. She slid one more thing across the counter after it, a contract blank with her name already on it. I've helped you 4 times now, Leech, and I don't do charity any more than you do. Her grin was sharp, but for once not entirely teasing. When this is over, when you're somebody and we both know you're betting your life that you will be, I want in. Not your money, your network. Whatever it is you're quietly building down here in the dark while the noble houses aren't looking. She tapped the blank contract. I'm the best connected person in 3 districts and I'm wasting it behind a government counter stamping death warrants. You collect undervalued people. Well, she spread her hands. Look at me. I looked. She wasn't wrong about her own price, which is the most dangerous kind of person to negotiate with. Deal, I said, and signed nothing, because with Mei Lin the handshake was the contract and we both knew it. One more node on the web, and this one had teeth. Before I bet Yuna's life on beating the glass blade, I wanted to see him do the thing he was famous for. So Mei Lin got us into the back of a sanctioned exhibition and I watched the glass blade work. It wasn't a fight. A fight implies 2 participants. A challenger, a real one, a ranked hunter with a decade of survival behind him, stepped onto that stage. The glass blade crossed to him with that same unhurried clerk's calm, and then the challenger was on the ground and it was over. The part that put ice in my stomach was that I genuinely hadn't seen the strike. None of us had. 20,000 trained eyes, and the exchange happened in the gap between heartbeats. The crowd didn't cheer. They exhaled the way you do when you've watched something you weren't sure was survivable. Beside me, Yuna watched the replay twice, 3 times, silent, cataloging. Well, I murmured, hiding the fear in my voice with everything I had. She didn't look away from the screen. He's never been hit, she said quietly. He doesn't know what to do after the first exchange because for him there's never been one. That's the only door. It's a small door. It was a terrifyingly small door. But it was a door, and Yuna had spent 2 years learning to walk through doors nobody else could see. The last week before the trial was the kind of grind that breaks people. Yuna trained until her hands bled and tan serum stitched them back together so she could bleed again. We drilled one thing, over and over, until it lived in her spine. Survive the first exchange. The glass blade's entire legend was built on a single, unseeable strike. So we didn't try to beat the strike. We built her into the one person in the city who could eat it and still be standing on the second beat. Because the second beat was the only place he had never been. I managed the reservoir like a miser with a grudge, hoarding every drop of tribute, refusing to spend even when she begged for a breakthrough, because I'd learned exactly what an empty well costs at the worst possible second. She hated it, she wanted to climb, and I kept making her save. "You're holding me back," she snapped one night, exhausted and furious. "I know," I said, "on purpose. There's a difference between the most power and the right power at the right moment, and the trial isn't going to reward the bigger number. It's going to reward whoever still has something left when it counts." She didn't like it. But the night before the trial, when she finally understood why, she'd stop arguing. People always do, right after it works. That night the other box found me. Not the Zhao box, the patron who'd been watching Yuna clean out the pits. A courier brought a single black card with a single line of silver text. "The girl is wasted on a leech. When you lose her, come see me. You have promise." No name. Just an address in the upper tiers where even the air costs money. I should have burned it. Instead, I put it in my pocket because a man with my odds doesn't throw away options, even poisoned ones. Someone powerful had looked at what I was building and wanted it, wanted her, wanted me, wanted the engine. I didn't know who yet. I didn't know it would cost me. I only knew that winning the trial wouldn't make us safe. It would just promote us to bigger predators. The city was starting to notice the leech, and nothing dangerous in Longhai stays unnoticed for long. After the courier left, I climbed to the roof of our building and looked up, really looked, at the part of the city I'd spent my whole life trained not to see. The upper tiers. Longhai goes vertical when it gets rich. The higher you live, the cleaner the air, the brighter the lights, until at the very top the towers of the great houses float in their own private dusk, gold and serene, close enough to see and far enough to never reach. That's where the black card came from. That's where the Zhao house plotted, where the glass blade got bought, where a woman with silver-edged cards watched people like me the way I watch undervalued assets. For 20 years that skyline had been a ceiling, the literal glowing proof of exactly how far a zero would never get to climb. Standing there with a system in my head and a black card in my pocket, I looked at it differently for the first time. Not a ceiling, a scoreboard, and I have always wanted to see my name at the top of one. The patron thought she was recruiting an asset. She had no idea she'd just shown a compulsive climber the mountain. The night before the trial, Yuna didn't train. She sat on the floor of that beat-up hall, sword across her knees, and for a while neither of us said anything. Then, "Why are you really doing this?" Not an accusation, a question. The whole truth would have sounded insane, that a system in my head paid me to make her strong, that her sweat was literally my power, that she was the best investment in human history. So I gave her the part of the truth that wasn't a ledger. "Because everyone in this city looked at you and saw a curse," I said. "And I looked at you and saw the only person who never stopped trying. I bet on people who don't quit. You're the surest bet I've ever made." She looked at me for a long moment, something unguarded and dangerous in her face. "Don't make me regret trusting you," she said quietly. "I won't," I said, and I actually meant it, which scared me more than the glass blade did. The district open trials are held in a real arena, tiered seating, broadcast drones. A crowd that comes for spectacle and isn't picky about whose blood provides it. The Zhao house took the grandest box, of course, and there, beside his father, sat Kang, heeled up and grinning at me like a man who'd bought a very good seat at my funeral. The registry made it official on a 50-foot screen. Challenger, Yuna, blacklisted, unranked. The crowd actually laughed, against the Zhao house's chosen champion. I stood in the competitor's tunnel beside her, hands in my pockets, looking exactly as bored as I'd trained myself to look, while my heart tried to climb out of my throat. "Last chance to run," I murmured. Yuna rolled her shoulders, eyes fixed on the light at the end of the tunnel. "Leeches don't run," she said. "You taught me that." God help me, I'd created a monster. I had never been prouder. They make you wait before a trial, and the waiting is its own kind of weapon. The arena filled to its nosebleeds. This wasn't just a duel, it was content. The cursed Jinx and her leech against a noble house, broadcast to every screen in the city. I watched the betting line on the big board and felt my stomach drop. The odds against Yuna weren't just bad. They were an insult. The kind of number you only get when the entire city has already decided you're dead and is simply pricing the spectacle of it. Then down in the stands, I started picking out faces I knew. Tan, the old alchemist in a seat he definitely couldn't afford, gripping the rail. Mei Lin, somewhere in the middle tiers, pretending she'd come for the gambling. Even a few of the underground crowd, pit regulars who'd watched a patchcoat ghost embarrass the boxes for a month and had quietly, against all sense, started to believe. It wasn't a lot of people, but it was more than zero. And I realized, standing in that tunnel, that somewhere in the last 30 days I'd done the impossible. I turned a girl the city threw away into someone a handful of forgotten people would show up to bleed for. Whatever happened next, that part was already real. Then the Glassblade walked out and the laughing stopped. He didn't swagger. He didn't perform. He just crossed the arena with the unhurried calm of a man who had genuinely never needed a second exchange, drew a blade so thin it was nearly invisible, and looked at Yuna the way a clerk looks at the next item to be processed. Peak Grandmaster, the very top of the realm, where power stops being a number and starts being a kind of gravity, and a hair's breadth from something worse. The crowd felt it and went quiet. Yuna felt it and I watched her, did not flinch. And me? I closed my eyes, opened the system, and looked at the war chest I'd spent 2 weeks refusing to touch, a reservoir of stored tribute deeper than anything I'd ever held. One shot. Everything I had all at once the instant it counted. Okay, I thought, hand trembling over the brightest reinvest prompt I'd ever seen. Let's find out what we built. The bell rang and the Glassblade moved, and I finally understood what never needed a second exchange meant. He didn't run at her. He simply was there, one step that ate the distance, blade already at the angle that ends people. Against anyone else in that arena it would have been over in a blink. But I'd been saving for exactly this blink. I slammed the entire reservoir into Yuna at once, 2 weeks of hoarded tribute, every fight, every form, every drop, and the world hitched. I felt it leave me in a flood that nearly put me on my knees, and across the arena Yuna's eyes flared bright as a struck match. The killing strike that should have ended her, she caught it. Steel screamed on steel. The crowd made a sound like the air being punched out of a stadium. The Glassblade, undefeated, untouched, a peak Grandmaster who in his whole life had never once needed a second move, blinked. Actually blinked at the blacklisted woman who had just stopped his perfect strike cold. For the space of a few heartbeats, the arena saw something it had never seen. The Glassblade in an actual fight. The flood I'd poured into Yuna burned bright and short, and while it lasted she met him blade for blade, that near-invisible sliver of glass flickering between them so fast the eye caught only the spray of sparks and the thin red lines it opened across her forearms, her cheek, the back of her hand. He cut her a dozen times in as many seconds, each one shallow, each one precise, the work of a man who'd killed 100 people and never once hurried. She wore every cut and kept coming. Blood ran from her knuckles down the grip of her saber, and she did not stop reading him, the economy of his footwork, the single angle he favored, the contempt that hadn't yet learned to take her seriously. The surge would fade. It always faded. But she was banking everything it bought her into the one ledger that never runs dry. She was learning him. Here's what the Zhao House didn't understand when they rented the deadliest blade in the realm to murder a nobody. Power you purchase makes you strong. Power you earn makes you dangerous. The Glassblade had spent his whole career ending fights in one exchange because no one had ever survived to the second, which meant, I realized as I watched, that he had no idea how to fight someone who didn't fold. Yuna did. Yuna had spent 2 years getting up off the ground in an empty hall with nobody watching and nothing to gain. So when the Glassblade reset and came again, faster, furious, she didn't try to overpower him. She did the thing the city had branded her for. She survived. She read him. She bled and kept reading. Every exchange she learned his rhythm a little better, while he learned, for the first time in his life, what it felt like to be in a fight that lasted. There was a moment, the crowd still talks about it, where everyone in that arena, including me, thought she was going to die. Because the Glassblade did the thing the Whispers had warned about. Cornered for the first time in his life by a fight that simply would not end, his pride cracked, and something underneath it broke open. The air itself bent. Power none of us had a name for came howling up out of him as he forced the breakthrough right there on the arena floor, in front of the whole screaming city, peak Grandmaster into Saint, mid-fight, the realm shifting around him like gravity inverting. He'd become the exact thing this city was terrified of, and he'd done it to kill her. He caught her. A cut opened across her shoulder, then her thigh, and she went down to one knee, and the Zhao box surged to its feet smelling blood, and my heart simply stopped. My hand went to the reserve to dump what was left to do something, and the system, cold and clear, stopped me. Target ascended, early Saint, foundation unstable, flood insufficient to overpower, premature expenditure guarantees defeat, unstable. There it was, the only word that mattered. A Saint 30 seconds old on a foundation that hadn't set, raw, surging, full of seams. I had one shot, one flood, and if I spent it now to keep her upright, I'd have nothing for the opening that was about to crack open in him. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my self-interested life. I trusted her. I took my hand off the button, met her eyes across 40 feet of arena as she knelt there bleeding, and I did not save her. I waited. And Yuna, who had spent 2 years learning that no one was ever coming, saw me choose to wait, understood exactly what it cost me, and got up anyway. What came next wasn't swordsmanship anymore. The glass blade had a saint's power and 30 seconds of experience holding it, and it poured out of him in raw, jagged waves, strikes that cracked the arena floor, pressure that flattened the front rows, a storm of force with no discipline behind it. It should have erased her. It nearly did. A glancing blow threw her the length of the ring and left her spitting blood onto the sand. Another opened her brow so the red ran into one eye. But here was the thing only Yuna and I understood. A man fighting his own new power is a man fighting two opponents, and she'd spent the whole night learning to count the half-beats his old self kept leaving behind. Every wild surge had a seam in it, a place where the unstable foundation lurched and betrayed him. She stopped trying to block the storm and started living in those seams, one breath ahead, bleeding, ruthless, patient, waiting for the big one, the overcommit. The mistake a man makes when he is certain of kneeling, bleeding nobody is already dead. In the Zhao box, the grins were gone. I allowed myself one glance up, just one, at Kang's father, at the careful noble calculation curdling into something uglier as their guaranteed execution refused to die on schedule. They'd bet their pride on a sure thing. I do love it when people do that. Down in the ring, the tide turned the way tides do, slowly, and then all at once. The new power was still fighting him as much as it was fighting her. A foundation thrown up in seconds, surging where it should have been still, raw where it should have been settled. The glass blade overcommitted, the first mistake of a man who'd never needed a second move, made fatal by a body that didn't yet know its own new strength. And Yuna was already there, slipping into the exact seam the instability had cracked open, because she'd spent the whole fight reading his impatience and the last 30 seconds reading his fault lines. I felt the last of my reserve pour out of me, the well scraping bottom, and I didn't care. I'd saved it for this. Spend it all, I thought, swaying on my feet, grinning like a lunatic. Every last drop. Show them what we built. She ended it the way she'd ended everything, clean, fast, and so far past what anyone had priced her at that the arena simply forgot to breathe. One read, one step, one perfect economical cut that turned the glass blade's own momentum into the thing that beat him, and the saint of the dueling circuit went down onto one knee with her blade resting cold against the side of his neck. And somewhere in those 4 desperate exchanges, she'd done the quieter thing the cameras missed entirely. She'd crossed the last threshold for keeps. The borrowed flood I dumped into her had drained to nothing rounds ago. This was all her. She'd walked into that arena at Grandmaster's doorstep, and she would walk out, permanently and on her own earned power, an early Grandmaster. Still a full realm beneath the freshly minted saint kneeling at her feet, which was exactly the part the whole city was about to refuse to understand. Silence. A whole arena, a whole city watching on a 50-foot screen, utterly silent. Then the registry dumb machine that it is, updated in enormous letters that didn't care about anyone's pride. Match resolved. Winner. YUNA. The sound the crowd made after that wasn't a cheer. It was the roar of 20,000 people realizing they just watched a legend get born by a woman the city had thrown away. And in the tunnel, a Zero with an empty tank slid down the wall, laughing because we'd done it. We'd actually done it. You have to understand what it meant for the city to watch the Jinx win. For 2 years she'd been a cautionary tale, the cursed survivor, the bad luck charm, the name parents used to scare ambitious children. And in the space of one broadcast exchange, 20,000 people in the stands and a few million more on their screens watched that story break in half. The clips were everywhere within the hour. The cursed woman who beat a saint, the patchcoat ghost, the blacklisted nobody who'd been right all along. The Hunters Association, which had signed off on her ruin, suddenly had a public relations problem with legs, and somewhere in a comfortable office a man named Ren watched a replay of the woman he'd helped bury cutting down a saint, and felt, for the first time in 2 years, a cold little thread of worry. Good. Down in the lower district, where they'd watched a patchcoat ghost embarrass the boxes for a month, the pit regulars lost their minds. And me. I watched the whole city recalculate Yuna's value in real time, the exact thing I'd bet everything on 30 days ago, and I thought, there it is. The market finally caught up to the asset, or most of it, because up in the gold towers, the great houses and the association brass watched the same clip and decided, with the easy certainty of people whose pride demanded it, that it was a fluke, beginner's luck. A Jinx's one good day against a saint too green and too arrogant to take a nobody seriously. They left her paper rank exactly where it sat, a curiosity, not a threat, which suited me perfectly. Underpriced is underpriced, and the gap between what the top of this city believed she was and what she'd just proven she was had quietly become the most valuable thing I owned. Let them call it luck. We'd spend every day after making them choke on the word. The Zhao House, to their credit, understood the assignment immediately. There's no clause in any contract that survives 20,000 witnesses and a live broadcast. They'd made the bet public specifically so they could enjoy crushing us publicly, which meant now they had to honor it publicly, on record, with the whole city watching. Kang's father rose in his box, smiled the smile of a man swallowing glass, and made the announcement his pride would never forgive me for. The Zhao family was proud to extend its official sponsorship to the remarkable hunter Yuna and to formally recognize her support partner. Translation: the leech and the Jinx had just become untouchable, funded, and on record by the exact house that tried to bury them. Yuna walked out of that arena with her rank restoration petition fast-tracked and her name trending across the city. I walked out broke, hollowed out and grinning so hard my face hurt. Best day of my professional life, and it was about to get complicated. Kang found me in the corridor under the arena because of course he did. He'd had to stand in his father's box and applaud while his family publicly sponsored the two people he'd sworn to bury, and a man can only swallow so much glass before he has to spit. "You think this is over," he hissed, all the swagger gone, just raw wounded rich boy underneath. My father had to smile up there. Do you have any idea what it costs me, having him look at me like I'm the embarrassment? And there, for half a second, I almost felt something for him because I happened to know that exact flavor of being a disappointment to the only people whose opinion was ever supposed to matter. Almost. Then he leaned in and ruined it. He's going to fix what I couldn't. You and the Jinx. You're a stain now. And my family is very, very good at removing stains. He stalked off before I could answer, which was fine because I didn't have a clever line ready. For the first time since the system woke up, I wasn't thinking about the next move. I was thinking that we'd won so publicly we just guaranteed the war. That night, for the first time since the system woke up, the dead little training hall wasn't empty. Tan came, carrying a bottle of something he swore was celebratory and not merely expired. Mei Lin came, ostensibly to discuss business, which she did not do once. Even a couple of the pit regulars drifted by, gruff and awkward, to clap Yuna on the shoulder and pretend they'd never bet against her. I stood in the corner of my own crowded gym and felt something I didn't have a ledger column for. 30-some days ago, I was a number a machine read as 0, alone in a line waiting to die. Now there were people in a room because of something we'd built, not bought, not stolen, built, and Yuna was in the middle of it, awkward and stiff and clearly overwhelmed by the novel horror of being liked. She caught my eye across the room and mouthed, "What is happening?" "Beats me," I mouthed back. The system, quiet all night, finally chimed. House expanding. Host network, 4 nodes. 4. From 0. I'd told her I was going to build a dynasty starting from nothing. I just hadn't expected the first floor to feel so much like a home. 3 days after the trial, the Hunters Association did the thing institutions do when reality embarrasses them. It pretended it had meant to all along. A formal notice arrived. Yuna's rank restoration fast-tracked, her record amended pending review. The word jinx scrubbed from her file like it had never been stamped there in red. No apology. No admission. Just a clean new identity card with her real rank on it and a polite note welcoming her back, as if she'd been on a sabbatical instead of serving a 2-year sentence for a crime she didn't commit. Yuna held that card for a long time. I watched her decide what to feel about it. The old her, the one I'd met swinging a sword at ghosts in a dead gym, would have wept or raged or both. This one just slid it into her pocket, picked up her sword, and went back to training. "It's not justice," she said when she caught me watching. "It's a receipt. They didn't give me back my name, I took it." She wasn't wrong, but I noticed she kept the card, and I noticed she stood a little straighter for a week. Some debts get paid in credits, some get paid in posture. I'll take either. The strangest thing happened in the days after the trial. People started showing up. Not hunters, not yet, just the city's leftovers. A washed-out former scout who'd heard the leech took bets on people nobody else would. A teenager 2 days from her own reaping, clutching a tester that read low, asking if it was true that a 0 could make you matter. A disgraced engineer. A retired pit fighter with bad knees and a good eye. Word had gotten out in the quiet channels where the discarded talked to each other that there was a man in the lower district building something out of people the city had thrown away, and that being thrown away was, to him, a buying signal rather than a verdict. I couldn't take them all. Not yet. The system was very clear that a bond was a commitment, not a charity, and I had a house to keep small enough to feed. But I wrote down every name. Because every one of them was a node I might afford later, a future floor on the dynasty I'd promised Yuna I'd build. The city had spent 20 years telling me I was worth nothing. It was about to learn what happens when the worthless start finding each other, quietly on purpose, with a system keeping score. That night we didn't celebrate so much as collapse. Yuna sat against the training hall wall with her wounds bound and her name, for the first time in 2 years, meaning something other than a warning. She kept staring at her hands like they belonged to someone she was just getting to know. "We won," she said, like she was testing whether the words would hold weight. "We won," I agreed. And then quietly, not looking at me, "Thank you for betting on me when no one else would." I opened my mouth to make a joke. Deflection is my native language and found for once that I didn't want to. So I just said, "Anytime." And I meant that one too. The system chimed softly, almost smug. Objective complete. Bond strengthened. New status available. But I wasn't looking at the system. I was looking at her, which is probably why I didn't see the real problem walk into our lives until it was already standing in the doorway. She was beautiful the way expensive weapons are beautiful, all clean lines and the quiet promise of harm. She stood in our doorway in a coat that cost more than the whole building had ever been worth, looked around our sad little training hall with polite distaste, and smiled at me like we shared a secret. "Forgive the intrusion," she said. "I did send a card. The patron. Or the patron's hand. With people at that altitude it's hard to tell the difference." Yuna was on her feet instantly, sword within reach, putting herself half a step in front of me, which I noted and filed and will treasure forever. The woman's eyes flicked to that, amused. "Protective, how sweet. Though you have it backwards, dear." Her gaze slid to me, and the amusement sharpened into something that made my blood go cold. "She's not the interesting one in this room. He is." I gave her my best confused leech face, the one that had gotten me underestimated for 20 years. "I'm sorry, I think you've got the wrong, please," she said, and the temperature of the room dropped a degree. "Don't. I've watched the recordings a dozen times. A blacklisted nobody, starving, suddenly fighting like a hunter with infinite reserves. Then the exact moment her sponsor collapses, suddenly fighting like she's alone. Power flooding in and draining out, perfectly timed to a zero who never lifts a finger." She tilted her head. "Do you know how long it's been since this city saw a parasite, little host?" "I do. I've been waiting a very, very long time." The word landed like ice water down my spine. Parasite. She'd said it like a name, like a thing with a history, like a thing people hunt. And I understood all at once that the system in my head wasn't a gift the universe had handed me at random. It was something old, something known, something someone had been watching this whole city to find. "Relax," she said, watching me very much not relax. "If I wanted you dead, we wouldn't be talking. I want what you are, what you can grow. You've been playing in gutters and pit fights, building a little engine in the dark. I can give you fuel you can't imagine, opponents worth defeating, a board big enough to actually matter. Or, she let it hang the way I do, which I found deeply rude, you can stay down here in the mud and wait for the next house to send a saint who doesn't miss. Because they will now, you're visible, and visible and small is the worst thing to be in this city." She set a second black card on our broken table, turned and paused at the door. "You have potential, host. The tragedy of potential is that everyone wants it except the person holding it. Don't take too long deciding who you'd rather it belong to." And then she was gone, and the silence she left behind was louder than the whole arena had been. For a long moment neither of us said anything. Then Yuna picked up the black card, turned it over in her fingers and looked at me, really looked, the way she had the night before the trial. "Parasite," she said quietly. "Host, that's what she meant about you. That's the thing you wouldn't explain." It wasn't a question, and I was so tired of lying to the one person who'd stopped lying to me. So I told her. Not all of it, I don't have all of it, but the shape of it. That I'm a zero who can't grow, that everything she earns pays into me, that I'd taken the exact rule that doomed me and turned it into us. I waited for the disgust. The leech confirmed. Instead she was quiet a while, then huffed something that was almost a laugh. "So this whole time," she said, "I've been making you stronger." "Yes, and you've been making me stronger." "Yes," she nodded slowly and something settled in her face. "Good, then we're even partners. Not sponsor and asset, not leech and jinx. Partners." I'd schemed my way into a lot of things in my life. That was the first one I hadn't seen coming, and the first one I had no interest in optimizing. I just wanted to keep it. In the morning, I took the patron's black card out onto the roof to burn it, made a whole ceremony of it, flint and everything, and then at the last second didn't. Yuna found me up there with the unburned card and the particular expression I'm told I get when I'm being an idiot about something. "You're keeping it," she said. "Not yet," I said. "Not taking it either. Just keeping the option." He sat down next to me, close enough that it meant something, and we looked at the upper towers together for a while. "She's going to be a problem," Yuna said, "definitely. The Zhao house is going to be a problem, absolutely. Half the city is going to want to know what you are now, almost certainly." Yuna nodded slowly, then did the thing that still surprises me. She smiled, small and sharp and real. "Good," she said. "I spent 2 years with nothing to fight for. I think I'd like some problems that are mine." I looked at her, this impossible woman the whole world had thrown away, and I'd somehow won in a contract she didn't read closely enough, and I thought, yeah, me too. Let them come. We'll price every single one of them. So that's the story of how I stopped being the most useless man in Longhai City. 30-some days ago, I stood in a line clutching a deportation chip, waiting to get fed to monsters, because a machine read me as a zero. Now, I've got a partner the whole city is talking about, a war the noble houses don't yet know they've started, a system older and stranger than I ever guessed, and a very expensive woman in an upper tower who thinks she can buy what we're building. They all made the same mistake, every one of them. Kang, the Zhao house, the glassblade, the patron with her silver cards. They looked at a zero and thought they'd found the bottom of the barrel. Not one of them considered that a man with nothing is the only kind of man who has nothing to lose and everything to compound. The city called me a leech. Fine. But a leech with a system, a plan, and a partner who refuses to quit, that's not the bottom of anything. That's the ground floor. And I have always been very good at building. Day one is over. Let's see how high this goes.